The origin of the Arab-Jewish conflict is a topic that deeply resonates with biblical stories and continues to influence the present day. Since the time of Abraham, the rivalry between his two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, laid the foundation for what would later become a territorial and identity dispute. The impact of this rivalry has transcended generations and is still reflected in the conflicts over sacred lands. It's not something we can ignore. Understanding this historical root is the first step to comprehending how tensions have intensified over time. Imagine two brothers competing for the right to inherit the same land. This is the heart of the matter, where Arabs and Jews, descendants of Ishmael and Isaac, both claim ties to the territory of Canaan, what we now know as Israel. The belief on both sides in their divine promises to possess this land has created a conflict that extends beyond modern politics. It is, in fact, a struggle spanning centuries, deeply rooted in religious and historical principles that cannot be easily resolved. Just like in many family disputes, the tension goes beyond the physical realm and also permeates issues of identity and faith. This brings us to a scenario where it's not just the land at stake, but also the very essence of who these people believe they are. By diving deeper into the stories of Ishmael and Isaac, we can see how this struggle evolved and intertwined with much broader issues, which we will explore next. The story of Ishmael and Isaac is central to understanding the beginnings of the conflict between Arabs and Jews. Abraham, after receiving a divine promise that he would become the father of a great nation, had two sons, Ishmael, son of Hagar, and Isaac, son of Sarah. Although both sons received blessings, their journeys would lead them to very different destinies. Ishmael, recognized as the patriarch of the Arabs, and Isaac, the ancestor of the Jews, represent the start of a rivalry that would shape centuries of history. It's fascinating how this narrative reflects the nature of human relationships. Imagine the burden Abraham carried as he dealt with God's promise while watching his two sons forge such distinct paths. For Arabs, Ishmael symbolizes perseverance and faith, while Isaac represents the continuation of God's promise to the Jews. This separation marked the beginning of centuries of competition for legitimacy and the right to claim both land and divine blessings. However, there's something deeper we can learn from this story. It's not just a matter of sibling rivalry, but about how choices and promises made thousands of years ago still echo in modern-day decisions and struggles. As we delve further into these dynamics, we begin to see how the territorial claims that arose from these two men shaped the future of their descendants. And that is exactly what we will discuss next. The territorial dispute between Arabs and Jews is not just a modern issue, but a direct consequence of history dating back to ancient Canaan. Both the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac claim, based on their religious traditions, the right to this sacred land. The land of Canaan, which today corresponds to Israel, is the focal point of this dispute. On one hand, the Jews believe that God promised this land to Abraham and his descendants, specifically through Isaac. On the other hand, the Arabs, descendants of Ishmael, also see themselves as legitimate heirs to that promise. This dispute is not merely political, it is deeply rooted in spiritual and cultural beliefs. When a person believes that their identity is tied to the possession of land, as in the case of Arabs and Jews, the issue becomes far more complex than simply who lives there. It's intriguing to think about how this battle over territory has shaped the politics of the region. And even today, it continues to fuel tensions and conflicts. Many wonder how it would be possible to resolve a dispute so steeped in history and faith. It's a battle for spiritual roots that manifest in physical territories. As we move forward, we'll see that this rivalry is not limited to land, but also extends to the faith and religions that have emerged over the centuries, further intensifying the conflict. Want to dive deeper into topics like this? Check out our exclusive ebook in the comments. It offers detailed analysis and spiritual reflections that complement this video. As time passed, the conflict between Arabs and Jews intensified as three major religions emerged: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All these religions share a deep connection to Jerusalem and other sacred sites, which only fueled the rivalry between the peoples. For Jews, Jerusalem is the spiritual center of the world, while for Muslims, it's the third holiest city after Mecca and Medina. The struggle for control of these sacred sites became a reflection of the spiritual tensions between the religions. Imagine the complexity of a city bearing the weight of millennia of faith and devotion, where every stone seems to tell a sacred story. Jerusalem is more than a city. It is a living symbol of God's promises to each of these religious traditions. And when faith is at stake, the passion and intensity of emotions only increase. This religious conflict transcends the boundaries of time and space, sparking debates and confrontations across the world. Despite so many differences, there is a fundamental similarity between these religions. All aspire to peace and justice. However, these aspirations often take a back seat to the desire to protect and claim these sacred sites. But is there a way to reconcile these religious rivalries? As we will see in the coming moments, these spiritual tensions have also led to armed conflicts that have shaped the region's history. The conflict between Arabs and Jews has not been limited to territorial or religious disputes. It has fueled wars that have spanned centuries. From ancient tribal battles to modern clashes between Israel and Palestine, violence has shaped the political and social landscape of the region. The War of 1948, known as Israel's War of Independence, was a significant milestone, but the conflict extends far beyond that. Each war seems to add a new layer to an ancestral rivalry that began with Ishmael and Isaac. History is filled with examples of how these wars have impacted generations. Think of the consequences of armed conflicts: separated families, destroyed cities, and a region continually on high alert. While modern politics has transformed these conflicts into battles for power and influence, the roots of this confrontation are closely tied to the promises made to Abraham. It's as if the swords of yesterday have been replaced by today's weapons and negotiations, but the struggle essentially remains the same. Interestingly, even today, the Arab-Israeli conflict continues to generate global repercussions. The world's attention is intensely focused on the region, with numerous attempts at peace mediation. Yet, despite efforts, peace seems distant. As we move forward, we begin to realize that while history is marked by battles, religious texts point toward a hope for reconciliation, something we will explore more deeply next. Despite centuries of conflict, the religions involved in the Arab-Jewish conflict point to a hope for peace and reconciliation. Both in Islam and Judaism, there are texts that speak of future times of harmony, where nations will live in peace. However, this vision still seems far off amid the violence and mistrust that plague the region. Attempts at peace negotiations, such as the Oslo Accords, briefly ignited hope, but the road to lasting peace is long and arduous. What many forget is that peace is not just a religious or political desire, but a human necessity. Imagine living in a land constantly ravaged by conflict. The desire for peace stems from a deep need for security, to live without the constant fear of attacks or reprisals. It's a hope that permeates the hearts of all those living in the region, regardless of their faith or background. As difficult as it may seem, sacred texts offer a light at the end of the tunnel. They speak of reconciliation in times when swords will be turned into plowshares. This vision of a better future makes us reflect on what needs to be done now so that peace can one day become a reality. Is reconciliation possible? This is the question that continues to hover over the region and makes us think about how future generations will deal with this legacy of conflict. After understanding the deep roots of this conflict, you might be wondering, now what? What to do with all this knowledge? Instead of just watching from a distance, perhaps now is the time to start seeing things from a new perspective. Maybe this is the moment to reflect on how peace begins within each of us. After all, how have you been handling the conflicts around you? More importantly, are you ready to apply these lessons in your own life? If you want to keep exploring impactful topics like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we go beyond the surface and deliver the knowledge you need to understand the world in a new and profound way.